Welcome to the Daily Report. It's Thursday, December 2nd here in Korea. Local health officials have confirmed 5 cases of Omicron and have pledged an all-out effort to tackle this new challenge. We start now with the broader pandemic update with our Koea. So welcome back.
Hi again, Sunny.
Right, let's start with the latest on the domestic front then.
Sure, Sunny. Korea has now become one of the more than 20 countries that have confirmed this newest case of the Omicron variant. 5 confirmed here in Korea, 4 suspected, and around 80% were said to have contact with the confirmed patients. We will go deeper into the Omicron variant in a bit, but first let's take a look at today's daily caseload. 5,266 infections were tallied as of 12 a.m. and that is a record high here in Korea. It includes more than 5,200 domestic transmissions. And in the past 2 days, cases were in the 5,000s after we have hit that threshold just a day ago. And as you can see, it's quite an on-week jump compared to last Thursday. And also an all-time high here in the capital's Seoul with more than 2,260 infections and also close to 1,500 in Gyeonggi-do province. Even Gangwon-do province has been in the triple digits for 2 straight days, including a cluster infection in the military here. And then we've got triple digits in Chungcheongnam-do province, Daejeon, also here in Gyeongsangbuk-do province, as well as Busan. And many of these have cluster infections linked to nursing hospitals or other nursing facilities. Let's move over now to the total number of cases now in Korea at 457,612. We've also got 47 additional fatalities. The number of patients that are in serious or critical condition stands at 733, and this is also a record high and another rise by 10 patients in such condition compared to Wednesday. Now let's move on to our vaccination figures. So we've got close to 83% of the nation's population that received at least 1 jab of COVID-19 vaccine, and 80.1% are fully vaccinated. Now the government is also trying to get people with the additional doses to reach 80% in the future. For now, let's take a look at how many got those additional doses the day before, almost 160,000. Moving abroad, there's been a rise in cases in the past day, close to 700,000 new infections in the span of 24 hours, with over 8,800 deaths. And there's been resurgences in many parts around the world. Let's take a closer look here. We've got Germany with a rise in cases, and also France has been seeing soaring infections, with France also hitting more than 40,000 infections in the past day. I'll just take a look at the figure, the close look at the figure that I have here in my hands. In France, that is more than 49,000 infections in the past day. Germany, it's more than 71,000 cases. And in South Africa, there's been a rise by around 8,000 new infections. And here, there's been a total of 77 Omicron variants so far. And those are the general updates that I have for now, but I'll see you back in a bit. Sunny?
Right, so thank you for now. Right, concerns over COVID-19 caseloads here in Korea are being compounded by confirmation of the country's first Omicron infections. For more, I have Choi Min-jung in the studio with me. Min-jung, welcome back.
Thank you for having me, Sunny.
Right, then let's begin with details of Korea's first cases of this new variant, Min-jung.
Right, on Wednesday, South Korea confirmed 5 cases of the Omicron variant. A married couple in their 40s contracted this variant after visiting Nigeria in mid-November. Their friend who drove them home from the airport was also infected with the new strain. And also their son has been confirmed with COVID-19 and will know if he is carrying the Omicron variant when further test results come out on Thursday. Health officials are on high alert as the couple was fully vaccinated with Moderna shots back in October. This also means that they could have come into close contact with many other people as they were exempt from quarantine after arriving in Korea. Officials say that the couple and their friend are experiencing no unusual signs of illness other than respiratory symptoms and muscle pain. Apart from the 3, 2 more people have also been infected with the variant. The variant was detected in 2 unvaccinated women in their 50s living in Gyeonggi-do province, and it turns out they also traveled to Nigeria in mid-November. Besides the 5 who tested positive for the variant, there is a total of 4 more suspected cases that are pending test results.
Right, and understandably, Min-jung, there is heightened fear about a fresh wave of infections in the days ahead.
You're right, Sunny. Over the past month, some 5,000 people arrived in South Korea from Africa and Europe, where the Omicron variant is spreading quickly. Some experts say transmissions of the variant may already be taking place in the local community. At the National Prayer Breakfast this morning, President Moon Jae-in also acknowledged the situation as a challenge in the country's efforts to return to normal. Let's take a listen.
단계적 일상 회복으로 가는 길이 순탄치 않고 신종병이 오미크론의 위험성이 높아지고 있습니다. 정부는 하루빨리 일상을 회복하는 데 전력을 다하겠습니다. 국민의 걱정과 불안을 덜어드리고 더 나은 일상으로 도약할 수 있도록 최선을 다할 것입니다.
Right, Minjung. And as part of such efforts, I understand entry protocols have been toughened at airports. Tell us more.
That's right. All travelers arriving in South Korea, regardless of their nationality and their vaccination status, will have to quarantine for 10 days. The new measures will be implemented on Friday and will be in effect for the next 2 weeks. Those in quarantine must also undergo a total of 3 PCR tests. That would be once before the flight, another after arrival, and a final test before their release from quarantine. Foreigners visiting Korea for short-term stay will be quarantined at temporary shelters provided by the government. And also starting Friday, the entry of non-Koreans departing from Nigeria will be banned. But Koreans and foreign residents with long-term visas will be permitted to enter Korea from Nigeria, but they will have to quarantine at a state shelter instead of home and take 4 PCR tests as well. The same measures had already been put in place for 8 other countries in southern Africa. The government has also decided to suspend direct commercial air routes from Ethiopia for 2 weeks, starting Saturday. But the country will be chartering separate flights to ensure the safe return of Korean nationals.
Right, I see. And in the meantime, Minjung, what are the guidelines for those who come into close contact with Omicron patients?
They would be subject to 14 days of isolation, and there are no exceptions even for fully vaccinated people. Currently, those who have completed their vaccine regimens are not required to quarantine even after coming into close contact with a COVID-19 patient. But this rule will not be applied when it comes to the Omicron variant.
I see. All right, Minjung, thank you for now. Stay with us for the broader talks.
Thank you.
Right, the emergence of Omicron has prompted changes in the hosting of a number of international events here in the capital city. For that, I have Swa back at the desk. Swa.
Sunny, we were expecting hundreds of delegates from around the world to travel to Korea this month, a month after the first phase into our return to normalcy, as well as higher vaccination rates around the world, which should have made these international events much safer than months ago. But due to the emergence of this Omicron variant, officials decided to delay or change the format of 2 major events hosted by Korea. According to Seoul's Foreign Ministry Wednesday, the UN peacekeeping ministerial meeting, which was supposed to be the first and largest of its kind to take place in Asia, has been changed into a virtual meeting. Disappointment has been expressed as the event had been already postponed in April. Now, some 400 attendants were expected to be in Korea in person. Meanwhile, the 5th Korea-Africa Forum, which was planned to be a face-to-face meeting with ministers from 10 African nations, has been postponed for next year. The same goes for an annual gathering of heads of South Korea's diplomatic missions overseas.
Right, I see. So precautions are being taken. What is the latest, or meanwhile, with regard to the spread of Omicron in the international community now?
Around 24 of countries have so far reported cases of this new variant, less than 4 weeks after it was first reported in South Africa. Now, one of the latest to have become affected is the U.S., with top health officials there for days having expected the virus to be circulating in the country. One fully vaccinated person was confirmed in California who returned from South Africa on November 22nd. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said no other potential Omicron cases are being investigated and all close contacts of the infected person had tested negative. Japan announced its second case of the Omicron variant on Wednesday, prompting Tokyo to implement tougher travel restrictions. Entry to all foreigners from 10 African countries feared to have outbreaks of the variant, including including South Africa, will be denied. In Europe, at least 11 countries have confirmed Omicron cases. As of Wednesday, 59 cases of the new variant had been identified among EU member states, with most of them having recently been in southern Africa. Noting that it takes 2 to 3 weeks for scientists to find out more of the variant, the president of the European Commission said until then, this has to be done.
Vaccinate, boost, and distant trace as much as possible during that time. This is of utmost importance. In the very end, we will then know what to do, and therefore my line at the very end is hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
Sunny, an official at the World Health Organization, though, suggested that it might not take weeks for more information to be retrieved, hinting on some information within days. What's also been mentioned is that despite fears of vaccines not working as highly efficient as on other strains, it is still recommended. Let's take a listen.
We know that it's people above 45 with underlying comorbidities who are at highest risk of developing severe disease after getting infection, whether it's Omicron or Delta or any of the variants. And we know that vaccines are likely to have some protection. We still need to find out if there's any loss of protection, but we think vaccines will still protect against severe disease as they have against the other variants.
The WHO, meanwhile, takes the recent spread in the Omicron variant extremely seriously, with General Director Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus saying so should every country. As part of further cooperation on pandemics, the organization on Wednesday decided to launch a global process to draft and negotiate an international pact for the prevention and control of future pandemics. It won't be ready before years, though, with different stances on what a new accord should contain. The first related meeting is to be held on March 1st next year.
Right, well, it is the step in the right direction, hopefully. Now, meanwhile, Minjong, do update us on efforts by vaccine makers to better respond to this latest threat.
Well, Moderna is on its way to produce modified booster vaccines, especially targeting the Omicron variant. Moderna's president told Reuters that it will be ready to file for FDA approval by March next year. He added that booster shots designed to target the new mutations would be the quickest way to address the variant's potential threat to vaccine efficacy. Now, he did mention that existing vaccines will be able to slow down the Omicron variant as well. The company is also developing a vaccine that can tackle 4 different variants of the coronavirus, including Omicron. Meanwhile, Pfizer had also stated last week that it will produce a vaccine for the new strain in approximately 100 days.
Right, which would mean early next year then. Right, now while we wait for that, Soa, on the local front, I hear authorities in the country are looking to explore the possibility of expanding vaccinations to children below 12. Tell us more.
Right, Sunny. So Korea's Ministry of Food and Drug Safety has started its review on December 1st to give out Pfizer doses for those aged 5 to 11. Pfizer Korea had submitted a request for a clinical review to give 1/3 of the dosage that adults have been receiving so far. And meanwhile, the European Union, which had already given the green light for this age group, is expected to roll out the Pfizer vaccine for this age group 5 to 11 on the 13th of December, which would be a week earlier than previously planned. And that may also be because of the higher risks that we are currently facing.
Because of Omicron then?
Possibly, yes.
Right, Soa, thank you very much for that update. And Minjong, thank you for your input.
Thank you.
Findings for the third quarter show Korea's economy expanded at a sluggish pace, driven down by declines in domestic consumption and construction investments. Ji-young reports.
Amid supply chain disruptions and the COVID-19 pandemic, South Korea's economy in the third quarter grew at a slower pace than the quarter before. The Bank of Korea said Thursday that the country's gross domestic product, adjusted for inflation, grew 0.3% in the third quarter compared to the second quarter. Growth in the July to September period slowed from the 0.8% growth recorded in the second quarter. It also fell short of the market expectation of 0.5%. Exports, which are the key driver of the economy, rose by 1.8% on quarter, led by coal and petroleum products and machineries. Government consumption also climbed by 1.3%. However, private consumption decreased by 0.2%, mainly due to pandemic-hit industries like restaurants, lodging, and entertainment. Investment in construction and equipment also fell because of supply disruptions. The central bank has maintained its 2021 growth outlook at 4%, remaining unchanged from its August projection. In order to achieve the government's goal of 4% economic growth this year, the South Korean economy must grow by 1% or more in the fourth quarter. But an expert says reaching the target will not be easy.
I think that will be very difficult because consumption has not been picking up and imports has been rising because of the increasing number of infections of coronavirus, as well as increasing number of serious cases.
He added that consumption may not recover quickly due to concerns over the Omicron variant. 엄지영, Arirang News.
Consumer prices in the month of November, on the other hand, rose at an alarming rate in about a decade. Our Min Soo-kyun has more.
South Korea's consumer prices in November saw their biggest jump in 9 years and 11 months. Statistics Korea on Thursday said the consumer price index last month stood at 109.41, up 3.7% from a year earlier. Consumer prices have seen on-year rises of more than 2% since April. It's also the second time this year that the figures topped 3%, following a 3.2% gain in October.
Consumer prices continue to rise in the 3% range for the second consecutive month. This comes as prices of personal services and industrial goods such as petroleum products and processed foods continue to tick up. Also, agricultural goods are up again, with vegetable prices rising.
Prices of agricultural livestock and fishery products rose 7.6% on year, with cucumber and lettuce seeing significant jumps following a sharp drop in temperatures. The prices of eggs and pork were also up almost 33% and 14% respectively. Prices of industrial products climbed 5.5%, posting the biggest rise in a decade due to rising oil prices. The price of gasoline rose almost 34%, while diesel and LPG jumped by nearly 40% from the previous year. Last month, the government temporarily cut fuel taxes by 20% for 6 months in a bid to ease the burden on consumers. But the effects of those cuts have not been fully reflected at the pumps. Going forward, Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi expects inflation to slow in December as global oil prices are likely to stabilize and the impact of fuel tax cuts will help drive down inflationary pressure. Min Soo-kyun, Arirang News.
Changes in working patterns are threatening the existence of traditional companies, especially amid a pandemic that has accelerated the adoption of remote working. Our Kim Sang-win has more on this reality and a possible solution.
Building a business is tough, but what's becoming even more challenging is keeping it going. A recent report by South Korea's Institute for International Trade suggests the average lifespan of listed companies is getting shorter, possibly dropping down to 12 years by 2027. That's a drop of 80% from 1958. Perhaps the latest and the biggest threat to traditional companies is the digital transformation accelerated by the pandemic. Due to lockdowns and distancing measures, digital technology has penetrated deeper than ever into people's daily lives, from their work to school, even altering how people spend their leisure time. Amid this change, only fast movers will survive, while businesses who fail to adapt will die out. So how should firms prepare? The report suggests cooperating with startups and venture firms is key. Through cooperation, startups and venture firms can provide so-called digital DNA to traditional companies, boosting their ability to face the digital transformation. Being small and nimble in nature, these firms can quickly adapt to the rapidly changing business environment. Also, they're better in general at dealing with digital technology based on innovative ideas. The report says this means it's crucial for economies to develop startups with high potential. It added that cooperation between large firms and startups will become a win-win strategy for both of them, where startups can grow their businesses further while traditional firms could capture their innovative attitude. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
In other news, Korea's culinary efforts are reportedly pleasing palates across the globe, with local-style tweaks to fried chicken receiving high marks. Here's Shin Yoon.
Korean food is booming in popularity across the world. According to a survey of 8,500 people overseas by the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, more than 70% said they wanted to try out Korean food. And out of those who've tried it, 9 out of 10 said they were satisfied. Their favorite dish turned out to be Korean-style chicken. What makes Korean-style chicken different from other fried chicken is the sauce. The most common recipe is seasoned chicken covered in sauce made of pepper paste, ketchup, sugar, and soy sauce.
A few foreigners I met at a chicken place in Seoul said they could see why it was so popular. So how's the chicken, guys?
It's great, actually.
Amazing.
I will try it. Really good.
It's so crispy, juicy. It's one of my favorite foods here in South Korea.
They said it's not just K-chicken that's popular, but Korean food in general.
Before I'm coming to the Korea, I recognize so many foods from K-dramas, K-pop, so through the K-pop. So I think it's gonna be, everyone knows the Korean food, of course.
It was everywhere, so at some point I decided I have to try it, at least to know why everybody is so hype about it. But you know, the Korean spices are unique. Yeah, I think they're just unique. That's why everybody wants to try them.
The head of the Institute of Traditional Korean Food, who has traveled across the world to teach people about Korean food, said she too has noticed its recent popularity.
20 years ago, when I would promote Korean food at different food festivals around the world, nobody knew where South Korea was or what kimchi even was. But now, more foreigners actively look for and attend Korean food festivals.
Amid this trend, Korean cultural centers around the world have launched Korean cooking classes. The Korean Cultural Center in Vietnam has been uploading short 60-second videos that teach viewers how to make the dishes they've seen in Korean movies or dramas.
We first found out which K-drama or K-movie was the most popular in the past 3 years. Then, made videos using ingredients easily available in Vietnam, like how to make the galbi chicken from the movie Extreme Job or noodles cooked with Sprite from the drama Prison Playbook.
With so many Korean dramas and movies showing Korean food, I think it has become even more popular than K-pop. I too wanted to learn how to make Korean food I saw on TV, like kimchi stew or Korean-style chicken, because it looked good.
Korean food can act as a bridge, giving those living overseas a taste of Korean culture. Shin Yoon, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. 4 people were injured near a bridge close to Munich's busy main train station on Wednesday after an old wartime bomb exploded. Police say the explosion happened as the site was being drilled to build a tunnel. The blast resulted in rail travel to and from the main train station being suspended. World War II bombs are often discovered during construction work in Germany and are usually defused by experts or destroyed in controlled explosions. In fact, more than 2,000 tons of live bombs and munitions are discovered each year, more than 70 years after the end of the Second World War. British and American warplanes devastated the country by dropping 1.5 million tons of bombs during the war. Officials estimate 15% of the bombs failed to explode, with some buried 6 meters deep in the ground. Germany has previously reported deadly explosions due to buried bombs, including in 2014 when a construction worker was killed when his power shovel struck the device. With looming tax hikes and high share prices, CEOs and corporate insiders have sold a record $69 billion in stocks this year. According to Insider Score, CEOs, founders, and insiders have been cashing out at the highest pace on record, up 30% from 2020 as of Monday. Experts say selling is likely to increase even more as December is usually an active month for sales due to tax planning. However, while some market watchers see insider selling as a major warning sign, many of the stocks sold by these insiders, including Tesla and Amazon, have continued to surge after the selling. In addition, while higher federal tax for super earners may have contributed to the recent rise in selling, some say the biggest factor driving up the sales totals is the high stock valuations. Archaeologists in Peru have unearthed a well-preserved mummy that is estimated to be at least 800 years old. The pre-Incan mummy was discovered at the archaeological complex of Cajamarquilla, located east of Lima, and is presumed to be from the pre-Inca Xicala culture. Experts say while the exact age of the mummy is unknown, it could be between 800 to 1200 years old, with further carbon dating to be carried out. What's fascinated archaeologists is that the mummy was found in the fetal position, tied with ropes in an oval underground funerary structure. It was also surrounded by various offerings, including pots, ceramics, and gourds containing botanical remains. 이승재, Arirang News.
In line with efforts to ease the medical burden of escalating caseloads, authorities have declared home treatment of COVID-19 the standard procedure and hospital care the exception. Accordingly, quite a number of hospitals have been designated as centres to assist home treatment, and our Chun Song-cho is out on location. Song-cho, welcome.
Good afternoon, Sunny.
Right, so Song-cho, you are currently at a makeshift centre that is engaged in telemedicine for COVID-19 patients. Tell us more.
That's right. So I'm in Koea City, northwest of Seoul, at a recently opened live support center for COVID-19 patients that are being isolated and treated at home. Now, due to the recent surge of infection numbers and hospital beds nearing full capacity, patients with mild and moderate symptoms of COVID-19 are now being treated at home instead of live treatment centers. And medical institutions around the country are now joining in the government's effort to manage an ever-increasing number of patients in the country. And Myeongji Hospital is one of them. It's been operating this support center for over a week now. A group of healthcare providers at the hospital have been selected to work here to monitor and manage patients remotely. Because if you come down with the disease and you're caring for yourself, at home, you might have myriad questions like, how do you know when emergency care is needed? Am I getting better? Well, workers here are dedicated to answer those questions for you and to help you recover from illness. The center is capable of overseeing 2,000 patients a day, not just those in Koea City, but also in other regions in the country. So let's take a step inside and learn more about the center. All right, so it's pretty quiet inside because everybody is preoccupied doing their jobs. You see all of these desks with huge screens. Obviously, they're collecting and analyzing data from patients so that appropriate care is given to the patients who are being treated at home. Now, here's an official from the center, so let me ask some questions. 안녕하세요.
안녕하세요.
All right, so I'm going to ask him what the center is about. 재택치료센터에 대해서 간략하게 설명해 주실 수 있으실까요?
예. 코로나19 확진 환자들 중에서 반드시 입원이 필요하지 않으신 분들은 가정에서 치료를 받으셔야 되는데요.
So those patients who don't have to be hospitalized can be treated at home now.
이분들이 안전하게 가정에서 치료받을 수 있도록 환자를 모니터링하고 필요한 경우에 원격으로 진료를 해드리는 곳입니다.
So this center analyzes patients, monitor patients, and also diagnose them remotely so that they can be kept safe at home. 감사합니다. 말씀 감사합니다. All right, then here is also a medical doctor who's actually diagnosing and treating patients. So I'm going to ask him some questions. 안녕하세요.
안녕하세요.
All right, so I'm going to ask him what kind of diagnosis he's doing. 혹시 어떤 진료가 여기서 진행되고 있나요?
이곳에서는 코로나19 확진자분들에 대해서 진료를 일단 기본적으로 하고 있고요. 그분들이 직접 병원을 오실 수가 없으니까 뭐 가벼운 감기 증상이라든지 증상에 맞춰서 이렇게 약을 처방해 드리고 있습니다.
So he is treating patients who can't be at the hospital physically, and also he prescribes medications for them for mild and moderate symptoms. 그러면 혹시 그 확진자들 중에서 재택 치료 받고 계신 분들한테 어떤 점을 유의하라고 당부드리고 싶은가요?
네, 환자분들이 많이 좀 재택만 하시고 집에만 계시고 혼자 계시니까 많이 불안하실 것 같습니다. 너무 불안해하지 마시고 증상이 있으실 때는 이렇게 그 앱이라든지 보건소를 통해서 연락을 하시면은 이렇게 보초센터를 통해서 또 진료를 보실 수가 있고 또 증상에 맞춰서 급한 경우에는 또 저희들이 그런 의료 그 정부기관 쪽으로 더 좀 신경을 써달라고 얘기를 할 수가 있으니까. 너무 불안해하지 마시고 문제가 있으면 저희한테 바로바로 얘기를 해주시면 좋을 것 같습니다.
So I asked him what are the things that he wants to tell patients who are being treated at home now, and he said, first thing is, I think a lot of the people are very anxious and nervous about their symptoms. So he asked those people to contact medical workers whenever they want through app, and if they have some weird symptoms, then they can be connected to other healthcare facilities as well. 답변 감사드립니다. 감사합니다. All right, so knowing that patients are being taken care of by healthcare workers here is such a relief to know because, unless you're a health expert, looking after yourself at home alone can be quite overwhelming, scary, and also nervous. There are said to be over 10,000 patients who are being treated at home in South Korea with COVID-19 symptoms. So these workers are working tirelessly and selflessly to keep us safe. Let's do our part and adhere to health and safety protocols. This has been Chun Sung-cho reporting live from Koea, and back to Sunny in the studio.
All right, Sung-cho, thank you. And a very big thank you to all the medical workers out there who are doing all they can to battle the pandemic. The pandemic has thrown the world a fresh curveball, and authorities are moving to counter the new challenge with comprehensive analyses, border controls, and fresh calls for public vigilance and vaccination. For more, I have Professor Chung Gi-seok from Hallym University. It's a pleasure to have you back, Professor Chung.
Thank you for having me.
I also have Professor David Kwak from Sooncheng University. Good to see you again, Professor Kwak.
Good afternoon, Sunny.
Professor Chung, I'll start with you. Now, prior to Wednesday's announcement of Korea's first 5 cases of Omicron infections, health officials on Tuesday spoke about looking into suspected cases after one sample tested positive for a variant that was not the Delta. Could you explain this for us?
Well, there is a very interesting and tricky story behind the finding of a first case in Omicron, Korea. As you know, there are several ways to confirm variants. The first one is whole genome analysis. That's the most accurate, but it takes time. And the second one is target genome sequencing. It's on progress. Still, you need to have a suspicion on that. But we are doing variant PCR from alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. But Omicron PCR is not established yet. But one officer in the laboratory center found that the suspicious one sample had a certain mutation. It's named N501Y. This is amino acid variants. Alpha, beta, gamma has that mutant. And also Omicron has that one. Delta has no one. So they found the patient has an N501Y variant, and the sample was proved to have no alpha, no beta, no gamma. So in that case, it's not Delta either. So they suspected to be an Omicron variant, and they started whole genome sequencing and found that that was the first case of Omicron in Korea.
Right, so it's all thanks to this one researcher at the laboratory.
Yeah, I think that scientist is very clever.
Right. And Professor Kwak, against that backdrop, now what are your thoughts on the possible transmission of this mutant virus, should I call it, Omicron, across the community?
Well, so this was the first case that we found, and we're mainly concerned if this first case actually could become a cluster infection because they have been supposedly exposed to many different people already. But I personally don't think it will be the first ever case that happened in Korea, as many of the global countries are already reporting. They're suspecting that it has probably been going on for several months already, and they found traces back to possibly sometime in October and in November, possibly in some of the European countries, which tells us that it is also possible that it has already intruded into our country as well. So if we're to seek even further and maybe find or dig up the domestic cases of its genomic coding and PCR for specific codings for Omicron, I think there's a chance that we might also find it even within our domestic cases. So for this incidence only, would it, if you're asking me if there's a possibility that this might turn into cluster infection, I would say yes, there is a chance that it may become a cluster infection, but I would also add that there's also a chance that other cluster infections could possibly be happening already from the Omicron variant as well.
Right. And Professor Kwak, just out of curiosity, what are the chances of infection faced by the other passengers on the flight back to Korea from Nigeria shared by the married couple? Because they were in a flight that probably included, I believe, about 40 passengers.
Right.
Are they all at high risk?
I wouldn't necessarily say so, because up until now, it has been very rare that passengers who shared the same ride in the same plane were infected from a passenger who happened to be on the plane. I think it's partly because the plane itself is negatively pressured. So it creates an atmosphere where there's lesser chance for transmission to occur among passengers. But it doesn't completely exclude any possibilities at all. So I cannot guarantee that there's no chance for any of the passengers to have been infected. But I would also think that it's still very rare of a chance if there is any.
Right. Professor Chung, the global health body, for its part, has denounced the latest travel bans imposed on southern African countries in light of the Omicron scare, of course. What are your thoughts on this, and how or what do you propose to deal with the current situation?
Well, it's quite urgent globally and domestically. So WHO document in that, they say that if you close the border, then illegal entry will occur and people smuggling will occur. But it only applies to certain countries, like many inland borders. But like Korea, we are like an island. So we have a border with North Korea, which is very strictly closed. And neighbor forces and Coast Guards, police are working very well so far. So there is a very low chance of people smuggling into our country. So I think we cannot prevent the inflow of Omicron from now on. It's been already in our society, but it's very important to postpone the inflow and postpone the circulating viruses number in here, because we saw about 10% increase every week of Delta variants starting from July until beginning of September. It's now at 100%. If Omicron predominates, and that will take a month or 2 months from now on, that we have to postpone and delay the predominance of Omicron if it is very serious, if it's more transmissible, and if it is more toxic. We need more data on that, but I really insist on strictly controlling the border until we find everything about Omicron variant.
Right. And Professor Kwak, there is widespread belief that our current vaccines and treatment options may be less effective against Omicron. What are your thoughts?
So the speculation is made based on science pretty much, actually. Different pharmaceutical companies that have also made their own statements that they also expect their own treatment regimen or vaccinations to work less efficaciously against Omicron were it to happen in clinical cases. But I actually dug a little deeper into the statements, and none of these treatment regimen or the vaccines have thoroughly or formally studied against particular Omicron variant yet. So there is no formal study that backs these statements up. These are only statements and speculations these responsible people have made so far. I believe there was an exaggeration by a certain number of media outlets that turned these statements into something that was formally based on a formal study, but no, those are not true. But rather, these are really speculations that these people have made. But speaking of which, this speculation is also scientifically grounded, however, because the number of mutations this Omicron currently carries makes it vastly different in their spike proteins, which the antibodies that these vaccines formulate, also antibody treatments that different companies come up with, are targeting. So if they change morphologically due to several more different mutations being made on that specific protein, obviously the antibodies we fight against these viruses with is not going to be able to attack as much. So it makes sense that we can anticipate lesser efficacy from the current vaccines or the treatment regimen that we currently have at hand. However, it does not mean these vaccines or antibodies will not completely work at all. It doesn't make it obsolete. So as these pharmaceutical companies also state, we still have much better chance of fighting even the new variant with the vaccines rather than without them. So we still have to iterate the fact that most everyone still needs to get vaccinated if they haven't already yet, but also if they require booster shots, then they would strongly recommend it to do so.
Right. So the information we have right now about the efficacy of our current vaccines or treatment options are educated guesses. Would that be a logical way of looking at it?
That would be a logical way of thinking it. Oh, it's only an educated guess based on the fact that there are so many mutations made on the variant, but no clinical studies have been done so far on this particular variant.
Right, Professor Kwok, understood. Professor Chung, in the meantime, Korea's daily tally is hovering on the 5,000 level. The number of severe cases stands well above 700. Do you expect these indices to rise further?
Sure. I think it's like a snowball. So if pretend RO, reproduction number, is 1.2, and we were seeing 100 patients several months ago, last year. And if RO is 1.2, it transmits to 120 people. But we are seeing 5,000 daily cases. If RO is 1.2, then 6,000 people will be affected by 5,000 people. So it's a tremendous number, but the government keep its own position. It insists on going forward, not stepping back. So while the medical supporting system is on nearly paralysis, and in some parts it's collapsed. So I had a chance to talk with a critical care professor last night in our hospital, and he said the survival rate these days is very low because the patients are coming in a very bad condition compared to the previous one. That's mainly because they were waiting too long before get to an ICU. The disaster, some part has already happening in ICUs and in sub-ICUs as well. So all I want is please the government to take some action. Either go back to level 4 social distancing level, or either to expanding the vaccine pass in some other facilities, not only in some gyms and some indoor facilities, but also in other places. Particularly, the vaccine pass should be applied in any place where people take up masks, whether they are eating, drinking, or etc. In those places, the vaccine pass should be applied. Then we can partly prevent the tremendous spreading of Omicron virus or Delta virus, whatever.
Professor Chong, having said that, though, what are your thoughts on expanding the vaccine passes to teenagers who are right now exempt from the pass themselves for cafes and restaurants?
Yeah, I think it should be applied as well because they are prone to have some side effects due to vaccination, but still they are each individuals who can transmit their virus easily to other people. So apart from essential places like a school, 학원, and some other places, then unnecessary places should be applied for even children. They should require a vaccine pass. It's just for the time being, and not forever. Just for 1 month or 2 months will be appropriate. So I strongly insist on applying a vaccine pass in children and young boys and girls.
Right. Professor Kwak, on the vaccination front then, some 80% of the population has either received the Janssen vaccine or 2 doses of other COVID-19 vaccines. What are the implications of this reality now as we face rising caseloads and Omicron?
Well, many different factors. The vaccines that we have received so far is not entirely up to par with the types of vaccines that were given to many different other countries. So even though we have reached up to about 80% in the total population to have completed some sort of vaccine type, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're all sharing the same efficacy in regards to prevention of the virus. But in regards to booster shots, it all being the same type and showing very great efficacy, I think it's going to give a rather much higher boost in creating immunity among the population. Now, that being said, from my personal experiences, because in my own clinic, I have to give many different antibody tests to people who are planning to leave the country. And I noticed strongly that people who received proper shots within our country to carry antibody levels. But for those people who actually came into our country from a foreign country who has received a certain different type of vaccine that is not given in our country, were much more likely to lack antibody levels. I want to set it as a base that antibody levels does not necessarily equate to the level of protection from the virus, but still it shows something that the type of vaccines that are given currently would be anticipated to be much better in its effectiveness and efficacy against fighting against the virus than the ones that were given to other people or the different types of vaccines that were given to us as well. So we have to consider that factor in regards to the coverage of 80% of the total population. Now, going back to the booster shots again, since the booster shot is going to only remain in a type of a vaccine, I think it should be given to most everybody within the nation. And if it is so that we need to give it more frequently, let's say we need a second shot of booster shot, and maybe let it be, because vaccines clearly, I'm a little hyper today. It clearly prevents vaccine or viruses from spreading to others, and it also clearly prevents people from becoming severely ill in the progress of the disease. Of course, it's not 100%, but in most everybody. I have a brother who works at an ER. He's an ER doctor, so he sees, as Dr. Jung mentioned, what's going on currently. He sees up to 3 to 4 deaths every day being caused from COVID-19 cases, and that hasn't ever been done before. So we're faced with a very dire situation. Currently, the only regimen of treatment that we have at hand is through vaccines. So and he's also mentioning, my brother is also mentioning, there's a drastic difference in clinical symptoms of people who had been vaccinated or against who haven't been vaccinated. Obviously, those who become much more severe are the ones that haven't been vaccinated. So I once again iterate that everyone who is eligible for vaccination should receive so.
Right. And staying with the concerns within experts in the critical unit center, like you mentioned, your colleague who talk about concerns of patients arriving with aggravated symptoms of COVID-19. Having said that, Professor Zhang, what are your thoughts about at-home treatment, which will be the standard procedure for COVID-19 patients here in the country?
Well, I don't agree with the at-home treatment policy in Korea, particularly because for some people, like Singapore adopted, young, having no underlying disease, having completed vaccination with mild or no symptom, could be stayed at home, and they can be monitored. But Korea, the government decided to keep all patients at home. That is a principle, he said. And in that case, what about the very risky patients? An elderly patient with underlying disease like diabetes, hypertension, chronic lung disease, and etc. So is there any transfer system well organized for emergent cases? There's no. Is there enough doctor to call to each patient at home every day, and day and night? And who can take care of that? Having experienced more than 30 years of pulmonary medicine in my field, I cannot decide well just by calling any patient without seeing a patient. We have to touch the patient, see it in eyes, and we have to listen to a stethoscope and etc. So I don't think this is good for anyone. So I again strongly recommend our government to change their policy. It could be a disaster for some people.
Having said that, Professor Zhang, very briefly speaking, what would you suggest is an alternative then to deal with the rising caseloads that Korea faces at the moment?
Well, once I said yesterday, we have to establish a hub hospital, big building, host any kind of COVID-19 patient, from moderate to severe and very severe in sub-ICU, ICU, and general ward. And all patients who have to be stayed at home can be transferred to that specific hospital in certain area. So there is no need to call here and there to one doctor, to another, to one hospital, to another, to begging for a bed. So the hub hospital establishments, I really strongly recommend.
Right, and that was something you said last time you were here as well.
Yes.
All right, Professor Zhang, as always, thank you very much for your thoughts. And Professor Kwak, as always, thank you for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
Right, well, do seek to stay safe amid this latest threat in light of the pandemic. Thank you for watching and see you same time on Friday.